Hey guys, I'm Alex O'Neill, your conductor this evening down the Waffle Express. With me, I have
Ooh, yeah.
Brandt,
Woo woo.
Ramblin' Ranj,
That's true.
bringing color and personality from Long Island for the first time in his life, I think.
It's true. This is my remastered version. I saw Majora's Mask and I thought, wait, me too.
Oh, speaking of remastered version, Greg Way, that leads us right into what we're talking about today.
Oh, cool.
Brandt, how do you
Me.
feel? Yes, you. How do you feel about this HD thing that's going on again? Now, I don't necessarily mean, hey, let's put
Hey, listen.
Majora's
Is what
Mask.
I believe what you meant to say.
Hey, listen.
Right.
Let's put it on a modern platform because
Yep.
you know that game came out a billion years ago or something like that.
Right.
I mean that falls under this umbrella, but I'm talking more generally about just like, hey, we don't have time to put out a game this quarter, so let's just like make that one that we put out 2 years ago prettier, and then we're gonna put it out again.
So we're talking about like the Diablo, the Tomb Raider, the. Just trying to
Pretty
think.
much this groundswell of remasters that are
The
coming
Last
out.
of Us.
The Last of Us. It's only been sometimes a year or less, or just one generation up, and they're all HD games. They still look pretty to some degree, but let's just put them out again because we need money. And obviously, there are iterations of this, like Ocarina of Time 3D, Majora's Mask 3D, that are
Right.
awesome and that we're happy for.
Yeah, but those came like 15 years after the originals.
Yeah, I think Nintendo does it a little bit better, mostly because they wait a lot longer than a lot of people are doing nowadays.
But not long enough. Like, I kind of wish that that Super Mario 64 came out on the 3DS, and that they made Star Fox 64 in the original DS. If I could flip those two, that would be great.
yeah, that would definitely work a lot better, especially because I think the stuff that they added to the Mario 64 DS, one of the most redundant and horrible titles that has ever been. I think the stuff they added there was really good, but it could have been better serviced on a.
They didn't know how to
modern
remake a
platform.
game at that point. I don't think that they
Yeah.
kind of got it.
Yeah, like
They missed the mark.
Mario 64 was like, hey, we're going to take advantage of the N64 and analog control, so let's port it to the DS and have it have digital control because that
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, no, if it came out again, I would be really, really happy because that game is awesome. I don't think I mind it that much. Getting back to the original topic, it's cropping up a lot more this generation than any other generation. I'll tell you that much. It's not like in the PS2 era we suddenly saw a dearth of PS1 games getting remade. But I do think that it's probably more difficult to get your head around completely new hardware this time around than it was the last time. I know there's always a jump, but it feels like this time they're like, okay, we almost need. And I don't want to belittle these games and call them tech demos because tons of time and energy went into them, but almost like, okay, well, we want to showcase what the console can do and what games that we're working on that will eventually be released will kind of look like. But first, like, here's a taste of just like how this generation is going to go down for the first couple of years. So I don't particularly mind it. Also, there are a number of games that I just didn't play last generation. Now I'm like, oh, yes. I think I might go back and play that. Those are kind of nice.
Oh, I skipped The Last of Us. I heard that was okay. Let me go play that. No
Yes.
one said that.
No,
one ever
but
said
what
that.
about people who didn't have a PS3 or an Xbox 360? I know that we're gamers, so we've been gaming since the dawn of time, but there are plenty of people, you know what, I hate the word gamer. We're like, we have played a lot of video games. We're enthusiasts. We're kind of in the media.
Yeah.
So we've logged a number of hours in there, but I'm sure there are going to be, by the end of this console generation, I would say millions, but at least hundreds of thousands of people that these are their first major exposure to video games and to make software that is great inaccessible to them is kind of a tragedy. It's also why I like the Virtual Console and the PSN with the PS1 classics and PS2 classics so much, and PlayStation Now, if that kind of gets working. Access to games, to more games is a good thing. Although I can see your point that the libraries start to look the same. It's how do I justify the price of this new console if many of the quote unquote marquee games are the marquee games of last gen?
Yeah, I think like an issue that comes up a lot when we talk about stuff like this, like, oh, they're remaking a ton of different games, and this is kind of like a tertiary issue, but it is still related.
Nice word.
I'm dropping a whole dictionary on you today.
That would be painful.
But like every time there's a new console, the discussion of backwards compatibility always comes up.
Yes.
And it's always like, as soon as it's announced inevitably that there won't be backwards compatibility, somebody's groaning and tons of people are saying, well, my current console works fine. Like I can't even play old games on it. Like, I'm just not going to buy it. People always just end up buying it anyway because they need it. They just need it in their life.
Consumerism.
It is such a weird entitled issue. And I know I'm playing with fire here when I start throwing around the word entitled, but like, why does a new console need to be backwards compatible? Why can't you just keep the old one? And I know there's this consumerist idea of trading in the old stuff to get the new, but just don't do that. And if you can't get the new, then don't, because you don't have to have it when it comes out anyway. It's an issue that I like to discuss because N64 wasn't backwards compatible with the SNES, and I wasn't complaining because I saved up and I got an N64 with just money that I earned. I got a Pikachu N64.
That was raw. That was a rad game. Rad
it came
game
with
console.
Hey You Pikachu with the fucking big bright blue Pikachu controller, and I loved it. And I saved up and I got that with my money, and because I didn't want to get rid of my SNES that I also saved up and got with my money like retroactively when I was older. And I didn't complain that I couldn't play SNES games on my N64 because I recognize that they're two different platforms.
Yeah, but we're edge cases. You know what I mean? We played, I have, again, my SNES collection is right in front of me, but I don't have a PlayStation 3 or a PS2 or a PS1. I still have all my Nintendo consoles because I never traded in my consoles or my games up in my youth. But I also don't have the same kind of fuzzy feel. At some point I realized that when remakes started coming out, that these games in one way or another are going to be available in perpetuity. Because it's not like they're not going to keep fucking, I think Brian Altano has an article on IGN that he wrote 2 years ago. It was an editorial about how he's bought the original Super Mario Brothers like 18 times or something like that. Like on the NES, and then Super Mario All-Stars, and then he bought Super Mario Deluxe, and then he bought the Virtual Console game on Wii, and then the Virtual Console game on the 3DS, and the Virtual Console game on the Wii U. Like these games that back in the day, because we're old, once a new console came out, you were just, there was no way to play these games, except for the first HD remake, which was Super Mario All-Stars, where it was like, if you didn't get the Nintendo, or that was your older brother's thing and your sister's thing, and they went off to college, and now there's the Super Nintendo thing. Here are all the Marios is. And could you imagine a world, Alex? I'm going to just take my hand and I'm going to lead you down a tunnel into maybe a better world.
Okay.
What if they had done this with other, Mario, and more Mario games came out than any other series, especially since you had Super Mario Brothers 2 here, which is Doki Doki Panic reskinned. Mm-hmm. That is the game, Doki Doki Panic, subtitle reskinned.
Yep.
And then you also had the Super Mario, the quote unquote real Super Mario Brothers 2, which is known here as the Lost Levels. Mm-hmm. So you could pad that out. What if they did SNES remakes of like the first two Zelda games in 16-bit?
Don't tease with my
See,
heart.
Imagine that was like a thing, or the first three Ninja Gaiden games, or the first two Final Fantasy, actually only Final Fantasy 1 came here because 2 was 4. But what if they did that? What if Final Fantasy 1 and then the Final Fantasy 2 that came out in Japan was localized and then came out here, instead of that we kind of live in that world because the first 2 Final Fantasy games, the canonical ones, did come out on the Game Boy Advance, which is kind of like a mini Super Nintendo. So we do have a bit of a portal into that world. But could you imagine if there were SNES remakes collections the same way that there are collections now of NES titles that were maybe a little rough around the edges? Boom.
It's a good point.
I know it's a good. That's why I made it.
And I think I'm very biased towards that because 16-bit is kind of like my favorite art style.
It's the greatest thing of all time. Anybody who says otherwise is a fool.
It's terrible. Like
They're not actually fools.
I like when I play Super Mario 3, which is my favorite Mario game. I prefer to play the 16-bit version of it.
It's the weirdest way I've ever heard somebody say Yoshi's Island. But okay.
Yeah, Yoshi's Island, definitely. And when I play, a Zelda game, my favorite Zelda game is A Link to the Past, and I think that the style of that game is it's the best. But like, I'm not losing sleep over it. As great a thing as it would be, I kind of grew up on this thing where there was the one Super Mario All-Stars, which was amazing, and I loved it. But to loop kind of back around here, I think it's backwards compatibility has become more of an issue each coming generation. And I think that's partly because there are more games, just in general, more video games every generation.
There's a lot of games
as we go on, especially with Xbox 360 and PS3 being the longest generation of consoles, and thus it's more time to fill with more games, and there are a lot of absolutely stupendous games toward the end of that generation.
Swan songs are amazing.
Yes, of course, like The Last of Us and like God of War 2 for the PS2. There are games that came out towards the end of these generations that should be remembered and could
typify those generations.
Yeah, they it's like going out on a high note. It's that kind of personified. But like something that I've been thinking about this week, again, to loop back to the main point here, is I also am not too opposed to remakes or definitive editions. That is like apparently the word that we're going with.
That's the buzzword, you're right.
Going forward. And HD remakes, because the more games there are, the more are going to get left behind just to be forgotten. Like, for example, and this is one I pulled in a blog post that I wrote this week, Donkey Kong 64 is a very weird game. I adore that game. I think it's fantastic and crazy and weird and adorable. But it was developed by Rare when Rare still worked with Nintendo, but it was a Donkey Kong game, and it came out on the N64. So it's not like Banjo-Kazooie, where it's like Rare owned that property, and when they got bought by Microsoft, that kind of went with them, and they ported those to the 360 and whatever. Donkey Kong 64 hasn't come out again in any way or form. Like, you can only play that outside of emulation, because that's not entering this conversation, but you can only play that on an N64 with the RAM expansion, like physically with a copy of the game.
Right, I'll agree with that.
And I think that sucks, because I love that game, and it's a really weird and interesting game that not enough people have played. There will never be enough people that have heard the DK rap in my world.
I don't know if it's that big of a loss personally, but I agree with you wholeheartedly. Also, if you watch speedruns of that game is broken in a way that few games are broken.
I haven't, so I'll have to
Oh
look
my
that up.
god, I'm going to link you to one. You're going to be like, oh, so I guess I really didn't have to play that game for more than 20 minutes. There's that game is, like they break games like Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask and Super Mario 64 in like really intricate ways by taking, like they make notations of every place where 2 points meet and how to exploit it. But like DK64 has some like fucking fundamental problems in the way that shit was coded, and it's fascinating. But I agree with you. You're right. There will be those things going forward. My example is going to be one of my favorite games of last generation is like an obscure JRPG. It's Eternal Sonata, and like I think Tri-Ace didn't Tri-Ace like just go out of business this week.
Yeah.
I think they just went out of business, so I don't know how the fuck that game is ever going to get played by people. And you're right, it's a kind of a doggone shame. But there, okay, I'm gonna put it to you this way. Let's say there's a game like Eternal Sonata or Xenoblade Chronicles or something like that, where it's like a gem, but it's not it's not particularly successful, and then it just goes out of print, and you absolutely can't get the game otherwise. I think digital can save you in that regard if somebody kind of ends up picking it up and says, okay, well, this is like an obscure gem. Let's re-release it.
Mm-hmm. And like the kind of closing or toward the closing point that I'm kind of getting to is in this blog post I wrote that you can read on my Tumblr, which is alexloneal.tumblr.com. I talk about something that comes up a lot on the Giant Bombcast, which is kind of the historical significance of making sure games are still playable, which is, it is the brighter side of emulation because in a way, like, you are preserving history that way.
Windjammers.
I have played Windjammers, and that is something that needs to be preserved. It's like each video game is not only like a piece of art that is unique to itself, hopefully, but it is also a piece of history, that reflects the time period it was released in and kind of the design and thought process of that time period. And HD remakes, like, for example, the Resident Evil HD remake that has recently come out, kind of reflects not only, the original, 1995 Resident Evil game, but also kind of what they wanted to change when they initially remade it.
God, that game is so good on the GameCube, yes.
And it is awesome that is so easily accessible to so many people across PS3, PS4, 360, Xbox One. And I think that's great. And I think HD remixes and remakes and Kingdom Hearts or whatever are a good thing to an extent. Obviously, everything's better in moderation, and I think we're just kind
of course
getting our feel out in this generation of what is too much and what is too little. But I think it is bringing up an issue in my mind, at least, of like preservation of games is going to be a big important thing. Like, for example, Donkey Kong 64, you can only play in this extremely limited number of ways. And
the Venn diagram though really works against it, of like rare games, Nintendo properties, and really like Donkey Kong 64 is it.
Yeah, I know, and it's sad that like it's like such a case, like a very specific lonely case.
But if Microsoft came out with the Yonky Dong 64,
all right,
that could be good. All right. So my, I guess, kind of closing thought here is that I agree with you. I do like the fact that all these games are accessible, but I think one of the reasons why that I'm not worried about being able to play Donkey Kong 64 and Eternal Sonata and all these other things, emulation aside, we're putting that to the side, because eventually that will be in 5 years. I'm sure somebody's going to make a PS3 emulator, and it's going to be called like fucking 3 Station 5X or some weird ass name.
Yep.
But we're at a point with this medium where, God rest his soul, the inventor of video games died like 6 months ago. We don't have the breadth of history to get nostalgic and like start to compartmentalize and like have this reverence. Like, the person who invented music died like 5 billion years ago. It's just some person who hit a rock against a wall, and nobody knows his name or where he's from or her. Of course, I hope that women invented music. That would be dope. Or, okay, so you have music and literature and all these other things which are huge, and then we're just getting to the point with movies where they've gained this reverence, because movies, the first film camera came out in the late 1800s. And so we have those, the earliest clips we have are very, very, very obviously low resolution, 5-second snippets, and then like people shit their pants because they thought the train on the wall was going to hit them. Mm-hmm. But even what we consider now contemporary films, if it was 1972 and you would kill a man to see fucking 2001: A Space Odyssey or something, or Apocalypse Now or some other movie, there was no way to make that happen. And then even when VHS came out, there were tons of movies that came out that weren't going to get fucking like Evil Dead or some shit like that, some other weird B movie. Only now in like the digital distribution, Blu-ray, you fetishize Criterion. Now that we have all these institutions in place, which we do not have in video games, there's no video games Criterion collection, where and especially because video games are so tied to these properties or whatever. Like Nintendo, it's not like there's going to be like Super Mario Criterion collection. You could put it in any game console and fucking everybody's going to get real. You could play it. That's just that I don't see that happening. Maybe in 100 years when nobody gives a fuck anymore, and like we're not so deep entrenched in it. It's only 30 years since the NES came out. You know what I mean? Again, there are people who are 40 who were 10. Like, it's such a young kind of. We're in an interesting place. But I think hopefully, if you and I aren't killed by some apocalypse or measles or whatever the hell else is going to come back, hopefully within our lifetimes we can see video games gain this type of reverence, and then the preservation will become way more important and toward the top of the list. And I have a dream that one day you'll be able to play Donkey Kong 64 on whatever the hell your Oculus Shift or whatever the hell we're playing.
If I could play Donkey Kong 64 on my Oculus Shift, I would lose my mind.
Yeah, print it. So there you go. There, I will step off my soapbox now, and I will use the soap later when I shower. And there you go. There's my point. There's the dropping the phone because the mic doesn't have a case.
I agree with you. I think that's a good point, and why you made it. Obviously, I just
it was good. Yes, that is why I tried to make it.
I just hope because video games are part of this weird echelon of technology that is advancing so fast now. Like it's like on the fucking bullet train, and it's going from the bottom of Japan to the top.
That's right.
It is. We don't know where this is going to kind of taper off and just explode. But I have a feeling it's going to happen sooner than we think. So I hope that we, in our race to the finish, we don't kind of lose sight of all of everything that was kind of building upon this, like the first iPhone, for example, and the first of these things that we're so accustomed to now in such a short amount of time.
It's true.
It's an interesting thing with how rapid technology is growing and expanding.
Yeah. Sidebar.
Yeah.
Before we end, how dope would it be? Paper Mario HD collection.
Dude, don't tease with my. You're talking about 16-bit remakes of Zelda 1 and 2 and Paper Mario HD collection in the same episode.
Yeah.
You can't fuck with me like
no,
this.
I'm just saying. I'm putting the thoughts out into the universe. My lips to God's ears. I want it to happen.
Just directly to God's ears.
Yeah. No, I have a through line, and it's if God exists. It is definitely tuned into Waffles versus Pancakes. It's weekly dose of video game needs. So if you believe in God, you should tell your friend. You should spread the word.
What are we doing?
I got very, very evangelical. The people are going to be like, the podcast they had some great points about preserving video game classics. They went on this religious tirade. They took a really weird turn.
They took a direct left at the end there. It was crazy.
Absolutely. I don't know if I'm on board. I like the Paper Mario, but they raised a lot of religious questions. All right, take us home.
So if you've enjoyed this, please subscribe here on YouTube, Irrational Passions YouTube, youtube.com/Irrational Passions. And hopefully we will continue with one of these every week, or as much as we can manage. Next week, you're going to PAX.
Yes, but not on a Tuesday.
Not on a Tuesday or Wednesday or the normal days that we were.
Yeah, well, so we're fine. We're the Waffles versus. You will see the before and after though.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure people have that in their mind.
Yeah.
Where it's like you before, and then that poster is like got tears in it, and you've come home sick and
ragged.
disgusting.
Yeah.
So you're going to PAX East. We'll talk about that the week after.
Sure.
Though.
Absolutely.
That's going to be fun. Last week, your kitchen exploded. Right?
Yeah.
Your walls fell apart. That's why we didn't record.
Yeah, a pipe burst, and half my kitchen does not have a wall. Have a roof, ceiling. Doesn't have a ceiling right now.
That sounds rough.
Yeah, it's not the best.
We'll be more reliable, and also starting second week of March, there's another thing coming that I guess I'll hint at here that involves both of us.
Yes.
And that could be cool. That could be exciting.
Yes, it will be exciting.
Besides that, you can follow Brandt, my wonderful cohort,
Yes.
at Ranj on Twitter. That's RANJ.
Yes.
If you can't get it's a weird way to spell Ranj.
Ranj. There you go.
And you can follow me at AlFighter27, which spells just like it sounds. And of course, listen to Irrational Passions podcast. listen to Misdiagnosis on YouTube
Yes, that's
with
great.
Brandt and
Nikki
his
Powell.
co-host Nikki. Yeah, and I think that's it.
Yes.
The end. Thank you for watching, guys, and tell your friends about us because we love you.
Yes, we do.
All right, next week, guys. Bye.